This is a reading from A Critical History of Greek Philosophy by W.T. Stace, Chapter 1, The Idea of Philosophy in General, the Origins and Development of Greek Philosophy, pages 1 to 10. It is natural that, at the commencement of any study, one should be expected to say what the subject matter of that study is. Botany is the knowledge of plants, astronomy of the heavenly bodies, geology of the rocks of the earth's crust. What then is the special sphere of philosophy? What is philosophy about? Now it is not as easy to give a concise definition of philosophy as it is of the other sciences. In the first place, the content of philosophy has differed considerably in different periods of history. In general, the tendency has been to narrow down the scope of the subject as knowledge advanced, to exclude from philosophy what was formerly included in it. Thus, in the time of Plato, physics and astronomy were included as parts of philosophy, whereas now they constitute separate sciences. This, however, is not an insurmountable difficulty. What chiefly militates against the effort to frame a definition is that the precise content of philosophy is differently viewed by different schools of thought. Thus, a definition of philosophy which a follower of Herbert Spencer might frame would be unacceptable to an Hegelian, and the Hegelian definition would be rejected by the Spencerian. If we were to include in our definition some such phrase as the knowledge of the absolute, while this might suit some philosophers, others would deny that there is any absolute at all. Another school would say that there may be an absolute, but that it is unknowable, so that philosophy cannot be the knowledge of it. Yet another school would tell us that, whether there is or is not an absolute, whether it is or is not knowable, the knowledge of it is in any case useless and ought not to be sought. Hence, no definition of philosophy can be appreciated without some knowledge of the special tenets of the various schools. In a word, the proper place to give a definition is not at the beginning of the study of philosophy, but at the end of it. Then, with all views before us, we might be able to decide the question. I shall make no attempt, therefore, to place before you a precise definition, but perhaps the same purpose will be served if I pick out some of the leading traits of philosophy, which serve to distinguish it from other branches of knowledge, and illustrate them by enumerating, but without any attempt at completeness, some of the chief problems which philosophers have usually attempted to solve. And firstly, philosophy is distinguished from other branches of knowledge by the fact that, whereas these each take some particular portion of the universe for their study, philosophy does not specialize in this way, but deals with the universe as a whole. The universe is one, and ideal knowledge of it would be one. But the principles of specialization and division of labor apply here as elsewhere, and so astronomy takes for its subject that portion of the universe which we call the heavenly bodies, botany specializes in plant life, psychology in the facts of the mind, and so on. But philosophy does not deal with this or that particular sphere of being, but with being as such. It seeks to see the universe as a single coordinated system of things. It might be described as the science of things in general. The world in its most universal aspects is its subject. All sciences tend to generalize, to reduce multitudes of particular facts to single general laws. Philosophy carries this process to its highest limit. It generalizes to the utmost. It seeks to view the entire universe in the light of the fewest possible general principles, in the light, if possible, of a single ultimate principle. It is a consequence of this that the special sciences take their subject matter, and much of their contents, for granted, whereas philosophy seeks to trace everything back to its ultimate grounds. It may be thought that this description of the sciences is incorrect. Is not the essential maxim of modern sciences to assume nothing, to take nothing for granted, to assert nothing without demonstration, to prove all? This is no doubt true within certain limits, But beyond those limits, it does not hold good. All the sciences take quite for granted certain principles and facts which are, for them, ultimate. To investigate these is the portion of the philosopher, and philosophy thus takes up the thread of knowledge where the sciences drop it. It begins where they end. It investigates what they take as a matter of course. Let us consider some examples of this. The science of geometry deals with the laws of space. But it takes space just as it finds it in common experience. It takes space for granted. No geometrician asks what space is. This, then, will be a problem for philosophy. Moreover, geometry is founded upon certain fundamental propositions which, it asserts, being self-evident, require no investigation. These are called axioms. That two straight lines cannot enclose a space, and that equals being added to equals the results are equal, are common examples. Into the ground of these axioms the geometrician does not inquire. That is the business of philosophy. Not that philosophers affect to doubt the truth of these axioms, but surely it is a very strange thing, and a fact quite worthy of study, that there are some statements of which we feel that we must give the most laborious proofs, and others, in the case of which we feel no such necessity. How is it that some propositions can be self-evident, and others must be proved? What is the ground of this distinction? And when one comes to think of it, it is a very extraordinary property of mind that it should be able to make the most universal and unconditional statements about things without a jot of evidence or proof. When we say that two straight lines cannot enclose a space, we do not mean merely that this has been found true in regard to all the particular pairs of straight lines with which we have tried the experiment. We mean that it can never be and never has been otherwise. We mean that 1,000,000 years ago, two straight lines did not enclose a space, and that it will be the same 1,000,000 years hence, and that it is just as true on those stars, if there are any, which are invisible even to the greatest telescope. But we have no experience of what will happen 1,000,000 years hence, or of what can take place among those remote stars. And yet we assert with absolute confidence that our axiom is and must be equally true everywhere and at all times. Moreover, we do not found this on probabilities gathered from our experience. Nobody would make experiments or use telescopes to prove such axioms. How is it that they are thus self-evident, that the mind can make these definite and far-reaching assertions without any evidence at all? Geometricians do not consider these questions. They take the facts for granted. To solve these problems is for philosophy. Again, the physical sciences take the existence of matter for granted, but philosophy asks what matter is. At first sight, it might appear that this question is one for the physicist and not for the philosopher. For the problem of the constitution of matter is a well-known physical problem. But a little consideration will show that this is quite a different question from the one the philosopher propounds. For even if it be shown that all matter is ether, or electricity, or vortex atoms, or other such, this does not help us in our special problem. For these theories, even if proved, only teach us that the different kinds of matter are forms of some one physical existence. But what we want to know is what physical existence itself is. To prove that one kind of matter is really another kind of matter does not tell us what is the essential nature of matter. That, therefore, is a problem, not of science, but of philosophy. In the same way, all the sciences take the existence of the universe for granted. But philosophy seeks to know why it is that there is such a universe at all. Is it true, for example, that there is some single ultimate reality which produces all things? And if so, what sort of reality is it? Is it matter or mind, or something different from both? Is it good or evil? And if it is good, how is it that there is evil in the world? Moreover, Every science, except the purely mathematical sciences, assumes the truth of the law of causation. Every student of logic knows that this is the ultimate canon of the sciences, the foundation of them all. If we did not believe in the truth of the law of causation, namely that everything which has a beginning has a cause, and that in the same circumstances the same things invariably happen, all the sciences would at once crumble to dust. In every scientific investigation, this truth is assumed. If we ask the zoologist how he knows that all camels are herbivorous, he will no doubt point in the first instance to experience. The habits of many thousands of camels have been observed. But this only proves that those particular camels are herbivorous. How about the millions that have never been observed at all? He can only appeal to the law of causation. The camel's structure is such that it cannot digest meat. It is a case of cause and effect. How do we know that water always freezes at 0 degrees centigrade, neglecting questions of pressure, etc.? How do we know that this is true at those regions of the earth where no one has ever been to see? Only because we believe that in the same circumstances, the same thing always happens, that like causes always produce like effects. But how do we know the truth of this law of causation itself? Science does not consider the question. It traces its assertions back to this law, but goes no further. Its fundamental canon it takes for granted. The grounds of causation, why it is true, and how we know it is true are, therefore, philosophical questions. One may be tempted to inquire whether many of these questions, especially those connected with the ultimate reality, do not transcend human faculties altogether, and whether we had not better confine our inquiries to matters that are not too high for us. One may question whether it is possible for finite minds to comprehend the infinite. Now, it is very right that such questions should be asked, and it is essential that a current answer should be found. But for the present, there is nothing to say about the matter, except that these questions themselves constitute one of the most important problems of philosophy, though it is one which, as a matter of fact, has scarcely been considered in full until modern times. The Greeks did not raise the question. Footnote 1. The reasoning of the skeptics and others no doubt involved this question, but they did not consider it in its peculiar modern form. End of footnote 1. And as this is itself one of the problems of philosophy, it will be well to start with an open mind. The question cannot be decided offhand, but must be thoroughly investigated. That the finite mind of man cannot understand the infinite is one of those popular dogmatic assertions which are bruited about from mouth to mouth as if they were self-evident, and so come to tyrannize over men's minds. But for the most part, those who make this statement have never thoroughly sifted the grounds of it, but simply take it as something universally admitted, and trouble no further about it. But we should at the very least know exactly what we mean by such terms as mind, finite, and infinite, and we shall not find that our difficulties end even there. Philosophy then deals with the universe as a whole, and it seeks to take nothing for granted. A third characteristic may be noted as especially important, though here no doubt we are trenching upon matters upon which there is no such universal agreement. Philosophy is essentially an attempt to rise from sensuous to pure, that is, non-sensuous thought. This requires some explanation. We are conscious, so to speak, of two different worlds, the external physical world and the internal mental world. If we look outwards, we are aware of the former. If we turn our gaze inwards upon our own minds, we become aware of the latter. It may appear incorrect to say that the external world is purely physical, for it includes other minds. I am aware of your mind, and this is, to me, part of the world which is external to me. But I am not now speaking of what we know by inference, but only of what we directly perceive. I cannot directly perceive your mind, but only your physical body. In the last resort, it will be found that I am aware of the existence of your mind only by inference from perceived physical facts, such as the movements of your body and the sounds that issue from your lips. The only mind which I can immediately perceive is my own. There is then a physical world external to us and an internal mental world. Which of these will naturally be regarded as the most real? Men will regard as the most real that which is the most familiar, that which they came first into contact with and have most experience of. And this is unquestionably the external material world. When a child is born, it turns its eyes to the light, which is an external physical thing. Gradually, it gets to know different objects in the room. It comes to know its mother, but its mother is in the first instance a physical object, a body. It is only long afterwards that its mother becomes for the child a mind or a soul. In general, all of our earliest experiences are of the material world. We come to know the mental world only by introspection, and the habit of introspection comes in youth or manhood only, and to many people it hardly comes at all. In all those impressionable years, therefore, when our most durable ideas of the universe are formed, we are concerned almost exclusively with the material world. The mental world with which we are much less familiar consequently tends to appear to all of us something comparatively unreal, a world of shadows. The bent of our minds becomes materialistic. What I have said of the individual is equally true of the race. Primitive man does not brood over the facts of his own mind. Necessity compels him to devote most of his life to the acquisition of food, and to warding off the dangers which continually threaten him from other physical objects. And even among ourselves, the majority of men have to spend most of their time upon considering various aspects of things external to them. By the individual training of each man, and by long hereditary habit, then, it comes about that men tend to regard the physical world as more real than the mental. Abundant evidences of this are to be found in the structure of human language. We seek to explain what is strange by means of what is well known. We try to express the unfamiliar in terms of the familiar. We shall find that language always seeks to express the mental by the analogy of the physical. We speak of a man as a clear thinker. Clear is an attribute of physical objects. Water is clear if it has no extraneous matter in it. We say that a man's ideas are luminous, thus taking a metaphor from physical light. We talk of having an idea at the back of the mind. At the back of? Has the mind got a front and a back? We are thinking of it as if it were a physical thing in space. We speak of mental habits of attention. Attention means stretching or turning the mind in a special direction. We reflect. Reflection means bending our thoughts back upon themselves. But literally speaking, only physical objects can be stretched, turned, and bent. Whenever we wish to express something mental, we do it by a physical analogy. We talk of it in terms of physical things. This shows how deep-rooted our materialism is. If the mental world were more familiar and real to us than the material, language would have been constructed on the opposite principle. The earliest words of language would have expressed mental facts, and we should afterwards have tried to express physical things by means of mental analogies. This has been a reading of A Critical History of Greek Philosophy by W.T. Stace, Chapter 1, The Idea of Philosophy in General, The Origins and Development of Greek Philosophy, pages 1 to 10.